Okay, so for this session, we will have lesson 6. Lesson 6 is income taxes. Okay, so for our general overview muna, didiscuss natin itong mga to. Ang income taxes natin, nag-start pa yan ng 1996, okay? Pero kung naman yan, may mga addition, may mga minimal or mga other exposure drafts naman na dinagdag in order to cover certain issues dun sa income taxes until 2019. 2019 yung last na updates natin dyan. Pero generally, it is just um, addition of items. Okay? So when you say addition of items, dati kasi hindi kasama sa sources ng deferred tax asset yung mga NOLCO, mga ganyan. So dinagdag nila. Tapos yung mga uncertainties, okay, sinaba din nila yan. That's why um, in the computation of your income taxes, nandito naman na sa ating summary lahat yung mga items na kailangan i-consider. Sorry, okay. So let's start with the summary of IAS 12. We proceed first with the objectives. Okay? So of course, the objectives of IAS 12 is to help your preparers of financial statement in accounting for the income taxes. Okay? And in order to achieve the objective, okay, kailangan daw masundot tong mga to. Okay, so first of all is we need to understand that it is inherent in the recognition of an asset or liability that asset or liability will be recovered or settled, and this recovery or settlement may give rise to future tax consequences which should be recognized at the same time as the asset or the liability. Diba? So, the concern there here is, basahin mo natin yung second point, an entity should account for tax consequences of transactions and other events in the same way as it accounts for the transactions and other events themselves. So in other words, the timing of the recognition as well as the future or the future effect of these transactions. So that's why in the accounting of income taxes, we need to understand na in the point of view of preparer ng FS, ang pinaka-concern talaga natin dyan is yung total income tax or yung tinatawag nating income tax expense or tax expense. Although, in order for us to account for the other provisions of IAS 12, we need to split this total tax expense into certain areas such as the current portion, meaning the amount that is payable in the current period, also known as the current tax expense, and the deferred portion, or those that will affect the future periods, also known as your deferred taxes, subdivided once again into two. We have the deferred tax asset, okay, which is going to be a deductible amount in your taxes in the future, and your deferred tax liability, which is a taxable amount or an added amount of tax to be paid in the future. So yun tayo. So let us have the key definitions. So key definitions tayo. So syempre dito mo na makikita yung mga basic na items, no? Okay, basic items na may encounter mo in the computations or in our computations. Okay, so first, discuss natin yung tinatawag nating tax base. Okay? Kasi dito nagkakaroon ng issue dun sa ano ba ibig sabihin ng tax base. Okay? Kaya meron siyang separate na discussion sa baba. So the tax base of an asset or a liability is the amount attributed to the asset or the liability for tax purposes. Okay, so medyo parang ano no, medyo parang inikot lang na yung term, okay? Pero kasi the reason kung bakit ganyan lang yung pagkaka-define is because there is an extensive discussion kasi magkaiba ang tax base ng asset, magkaiba ang tax base ng liability for purposes of determining it, okay? Kasi in the general sense, pag sinabi nating tax base ng asset, yan yung natitira pa. Okay, which is going to be applied in the future. Kapag tax base naman ng liability, it pertains to the amount that was already deducted. Okay? So ganun magkabaliktad yan, okay? Kapag tax base ng asset, ang tinutukoy dyan, yung naiwan. Okay? Na magagamit pa sa future. Kapag sinabi naman nating tax base ng liability, it pertains to the amount that was already used up or already accounted for. Okay? So, yun yung consider natin dyan. Okay? We are also going to discuss yung temporary difference. Okay? Pag sinabi nating temporary difference, of course, it simply pertains to the difference between the current tax expense and the total income tax expense. So that is what you call temporary differences. Okay? These are differences in the carrying amount and the tax base of the asset as a result of the differences nga of the tax treatment and the financial accounting treatment. Okay? Take note na for tax purposes, as a general rule, we are using cash basis. Okay? So hindi tayo nagko-consider ng accrual diyan except for generally yung depreciation. Yun lang naman yung pinaka iba diyan or yung mga amortization na tinatanggap ng income taxes. Pero still kahit doon sa area na yun, meron pa ring difference kasi iba ang tinatanggap na depreciation method for tax purposes, iba rin yung tinatanggap na depreciation for accounting purposes. Kaya mag-a-arise pa rin yan sa temporary differences. Okay? Pag sinabi nating taxable temporary difference from the term itself, bumiyok na eh, bibinata. Okay. The taxable temporary difference. Ibig sabihin, tataksan pa lang siya in the future. Okay? So, sa point of view ng accounting, tinaksan na niya. Pero sa point of view ng tax authority, sa future pa niya itatax. Kaya nga siya tinatawag na taxable temporary difference. Kasi sa future pa talaga itatax ng tax authorities. Okay? So as a result, meron din naman tayong deductible temporary difference. Point of view naman ng preparer ulit, si preparer, dineduct na niya. Pero, for tax purposes, idededuct pa lang na in the future. Okay? So as a result, si taxable temporary difference, pag minultiply natin yan sa tax rate, ang result niyan is the deferred tax liability. Ayan yan. Kapag deductible temporary difference naman, pag minultiply mo sa tax rate, lalabas yung deferred tax asset. Okay? So, ganun lang naman yan. Also, we have what we call current tax. The current tax is the amount that is going to be also equal to your income tax payable. Okay? Which is, of course, the amount that is going to be paid. Okay? In the current period. Okay? Nakalagay dito, the benefit of a tax loss which can be carried back to recover current tax of a prior period is recognized as an asset, also known as deferred tax asset. Okay, so hindi pa kasi, kaya nga mag-result yung mga NOLCO, yung mga ganon, or yung mga operating losses natin that can be carried over, it is also going to result in deferred tax asset. Basta ang current tax natin, it pertains to the amount that is payable in the current period. Okay, kaya nga siya tinawag na current tax expense. Okay. So, current tax assets and liabilities are measured at the amount expected to be paid or recovered from taxation authorities using rates or laws that have been enacted or substantively enacted by the balance sheet date. Okay? Ibig sabihin, kapag nag-a-apply ka ng tax rate, ang tax rate dapat na ginagamit mo is the rate that is expected to be enacted or expected to be effective by the time na magre-reverse na yung ating deferred taxes. Okay? So like example, di ba, currently meron yung tinatawag na create bill. Okay? The create bill, when it becomes enacted into law, kapag magko-compute ka na ngayon ng mga deferred taxes mo, ang gagamitin mo ng tax rate, okay, for purposes of computing your deferred taxes will be yung nakalagay na dun sa create law, kung maging law. Okay? Kasi sa future, di ba, yun na yung effective. Okay? So, ganun siya. Pero yung pagko-compute mo ng income taxes, yung income taxes natin ngayon, kung ano pa yung currently effective. Okay? So, yun yung item natin dyan. Okay, by the way, just an update for board exam purposes, kasi na-discuss din ito. ni Chairman Noe. As an update, always expect na kapag may panibagong enacted na batas, okay? May panibagong mga topics na nag-take effect during a particular tawag dito, during a particular tawag dito, during a particular testing period. Okay, testing period na lang ang gamitin natin. So example, mag-exam ka, sabihin natin May. Okay, mag-exam ka ng May. Nung January, merong bagong batas or may bagong standard that is already effective. Parang ganyan yung labas niya. Yung standard that is already effective, okay, on or basically 3 months or 6 months before, kasi hindi consistent ang application ng BOA diyan eh. May 6 months ang effect, may 6 months before nilang ilabas, may 3 months before, ganyan. Basta ang caution lang diyan is as students and examiners or examinees in the future, and as reviewers on our part naman, we need to make sure na kapag may bagong topic that was enacted or may bagong standard na effective, may bagong batas na effective at makaka-apekto dun sa subject ninyo, ituturo na talaga siya. Okay? Like, di ba, kunyari, sabihin natin, income tax, di ba? Ang income tax sa point of view ng taxation muna, income tax sa point of view ng taxation, ang dating ginagamit, syempre yung nandun pa sa NIRC. Okay? Ngayon, kapag na-enact na yung create law o yung create bill, pag naging batas na yan, still covered pa rin naman yung income tax, di ba? So ang labas doon, hindi vina-violate ng BOA yung pag-i-introduce ng bagong batas doon sa taxation kasi still covered siya ng income tax. Okay? Ang concept lang kasi diyan, hindi pwedeng maglabas ng tanong or ang prinsipyo kasi ng BOA ngayon, hindi sila pwedeng maglabas ng tanong na wala naman ng relevance during the time na mag-exam ka. Like example, alangan naman ang itatanong pa rin sa board examination is yung luma, okay, kung meron naman ng bago. Okay? Kaya nga it is supposed to be clarified by the examiner kung ano ang basis. Okay? Kaya usually ilalagay dyan yung year. Okay? Yung year ng problem para malaman mo kung yan ba ay old problem or new problem. Okay? So yun yung concept dyan. Okay, so anyway, ganun din dito. So, pero based on current developments naman in the IFRS, there will be minimal or we can expect that there will be minimal changes already in financial accounting and reporting. Okay, kasi na ano na yan, nasala na yan simula 2005. Simula 2005 doon na nag-start, puro madaming changes. Kaya at least ngayon hindi nyo na masyadong pinoproblema ang FAR. Kung ano yung naaral nyo before, basically intact pa rin yan. Except lang dun sa mga bagong items. Okay? Yan. Sige, next tayo. Doon tayo sa calculation ng deferred taxes. Diba? Just like what I said, ang gagawin mo lang dyan, para makuha mo yung temporary difference, kunin mo yung difference ng carrying amount at saka tax base. Okay? Tapos, para makompute mo yung deferred tax asset or liability, kung magkano yung temporary difference na na-compute mo, i-multiply mo lang siya dun sa tax rate. And take note again yung tax rate dapat is the tax rate that is going to be enacted or effective at the time na magre-reverse or marirecognize mo na yung laman ng ating temporary difference. Okay? Also, remember na yung mga unused tax losses or tax credits, kasama dyan yung NOLCO, okay, and whatever similar items, it is also a source of your deferred tax asset. Okay, so yun siya. So punta na tayo sa tax base ngayon. Okay, kasi ito yung mga medyo trivial portion pagdating sa tax base. Okay. Sa tax base, okay, it pertains to the tax base is a crucial amount or is an amount that is important kasi kapag nagkamali ka ng tax base, take note, 'di ba? Dalawa lang naman ang kailangan mo, tax base at saka tax rate lang. Yung tax rate madaling mahanap 'yan. Okay? Pero ang problema mo, yung tax base, pag nagkamali ka ng computation ng tax base mo, automatic, mas malaki yung impact na doon sa ating computation. So we need to know ano ba talaga yung tax base. Okay? So ito yung mga example ng guidance natin or guidelines in relation to how you determine the tax basis of certain items. So yan, ano na yan, naka-identify na. So unahin natin yung asset. Okay. So sinabi, the tax base of an asset is the amount that will be deductible against taxable economic benefits from recovering the carrying amount of the asset. Okay? Where the recovery of an asset have no tax consequence, the tax base is equal to the carrying amount. Okay. So, pag asset ang pinag-uusapan natin, basta ang hinahanap mo dyan kung magkano pa yung ma-deduct sa future from the amortization or from the depreciation or from the eventual the recognition of that particular asset. Pero daw, kapag walang tax consequence, yung tax base will be equal to the carrying amount. Okay, so in that case, if the tax base is equal to the carrying amount, walang tax consequence, pag nag-compute ka, zero ang result nun. Bakit? Tax base is equal to carrying amount. Pag pinagbawas mo yung dalawang yun, zero. Zero times tax rate, zero pa rin yan, di ba? Kaya kapag ganon, walang magre-result na deferred tax liability or deferred tax asset. Kuha. Yun siya. Basta ang kailangan mong tandaan dito, alamin mo muna kung magkano yung tax base, ibangga mo dun sa carrying amount. Diba? Basta ang tatandaan, ang tax base ng asset is kung magkano pa yung madideduct in the future. Okay? Or in other words, magkano pa yung carrying amount niya under the tax principles or under the tax authorities. Okay? So kapag ito, yung medyo kailangang i-emphasize, kapag walang tax consequence yung recovery or yung the recognition ng asset, then the tax base is equal to the carrying amount. Therefore, if the tax base is equal to the carrying amount, pag pinagbawas mo sila, zero. Kapag zero siya, multiply mo ng tax rate, edi parehas lang, zero pa rin siya. In other words, hindi yan mag-result ng deferred tax asset or deferred tax liability. Okay? Next, punta naman tayo sa revenue received in advance. Okay? For revenue received in advance, the tax base of the recognized liability. Diba? Kasi kung yan, diba? Revenue received in advance, that is unearned or deferred income. Okay? So yung liability is the carrying amount less revenue that will not be taxable in the future. Okay? Yung liabilities carrying amount minus the revenue that will not be taxable in future periods. Okay? So basically, parang ang labas niyan, ganito. If the carrying amount of the revenue is 1 million, ang tatanungin mo na lang sa sarili mo, meron bang, dun sa revenue na to, meron bang hindi matataksan sa future? Kung ang sagot mo wala, edi wala kang ibabawas. Diba? So therefore, the carrying amount is as is na. Okay? Next. Take note bakit pinaghiwalay yung revenues received in advance tapos other liabilities? Okay? Kasi, ito, para ma-emphasize that these liabilities are results of advance collections lang, kaya siya ni-recognize na liability, pero eventually is going to become revenues. Okay? Kaya siya sineparate sa other liabilities kasi magkaiba ang realization ng revenues received in advance at saka other liabilities. Kasi tingnan mo, parang ganito yan. Kapag ikaw ay may unearned revenue, para ma-realize mo siya, kailangan mong mag-provide ng goods or service, tama? So ganun ang realization niya. Yun ang settlement niya. Other liabilities, kapag ikaw ay mayroong accounts payable or financial liabilities, sabihin natin, kapag may financial liabilities ka, para ma-realize mo siya or para ma-settle mo siya, kailangan mong magbayad ng cash or other financial assets. Diba? So, in other words, mag-exchange ka ng financial asset, babayaran mo. Okay? Kaya iba ang treatment niya. Kapag other liabilities, ano ang computation ng tax base? The tax base of a liability is its carrying amount less any amount that will be deductible for tax purposes in respect of that liability in the future periods. Pansin mo? Dito, kapag revenue received in advance, that will not be taxable. Dito, carrying amount less any amount that will be deductible. Okay, for tax purposes in respect to the liability in the future periods. Okay? So in other words, baliktad ang treatment mo. Hanapin mo yung carrying amount. Ang next mo itatanong, meron ba dito o dito sa amount ng liability na to, meron bang maibabawas? Okay, for tax purposes. Like example, warranties. Okay? 'Di ba kapag warranties yan, meron tayong warranties na estimated liability for warranties. Okay, so sabihin natin ang carrying amount nun, sabihin natin carrying amount na is 500,000. Okay? Ang next mong tatanungin, ito bang 500,000 na to, deductible ba siya in the future? Okay, deductible ba siya in the future? Ang sagot ay yes. Di ba kasi kapag nag-incur ka ng warranty, sa point of view ng taxation, saka lang na i-recognize as actual expense yung warranty kapag nabayaran mo na. Di ba? So in other words, yung buong amount ng warranty is going to be deductible in the future. So kung 500,000 yun, minus 500,000, tax-based tong ating nung warranty na yun, zero. Ang carrying amount niya, 500. So 500 minus 0, 500. So ang ating carrying amount, 500, ang tax base, 0. So may temporary difference. Okay, so ganun yan. Sorry. Okay, so yun yung other liabilities. Next, unrecognized items. Unrecognized items, if items have a tax base but are not recognized in the statement of financial position. Okay? So, may tax base siya pero hindi siya recognized in the statement of financial position, the carrying amount is 0. Okay. So, 0 siya, ang carrying amount, tapos may tax base siya, so meron pa ring temporary difference. Okay? So, yun siya. So, this could either be unrecognized asset or unrecognized liability. So meron pa rin siyang classification. Okay? Tax bases naman tayo, okay, that are not immediately apparent. Okay? Tax bases not immediately apparent. If the tax base of an item is not immediately apparent, in other words, hindi mo agad ma-determine, the tax base should effectively be determined in such a manner to ensure the future tax consequences of recovery or settlement of the item is recognized as a deferred tax amount. Okay? So, in other words, kung hindi pa agad malalaman yung tax base, wala ka munang computation ng temporary difference. You will assume that the carrying amount and the tax base are the same, therefore there will be no temporary difference. You can only recognize a temporary difference kapag nalaman na natin yung tax base. Okay, so yun lang naman ibig sabihin. Okay? Next, consolidated financial statements tayo. Okay, in consolidated financial statements, the carrying amount of the consolidated financial statements are used and the tax basis determined by reference to any consolidated tax return, okay, will also be the basis. Okay, so ang sinasabi lang, kung separate FS, separate. Kapag consolidated FS, ang ginagawa natin ng income tax, di ba kasi gagawa ka na ng group FS. So, yung basis mo ngayon sa pag-determine ng deferred taxes, current taxes, yung mga ganyan, that's going to be based on the consolidated amounts also. Okay, so, yun lang naman ibig sabihin. Pero, for purposes of board examination, pag consolidated na yan, consolidation lang. Okay, walang lumalabas na consolidated income tax questions. Okay, pwedeng sa theory, pero dun sa ating problem portion, kung may lumabas man na ganun na question, dapat given na lahat ng items para diretsong magko-compute ka na lang ng income tax. Okay, so gawa tayo example. Yan. So example tayo. So, property, plant, and equipment. Ano to? Asset to, di ba? Okay. So kapag PPE daw, the tax base of property, plant, and equipment that is depreciated for tax purposes, okay, that is used in the entity's operations is the unclaimed tax depreciation permitted as deduction in future periods. O, tignan mo. Kaya kapag PPE, iba ang carrying amount, okay, based on um, financial statements. Iba din yung carrying amount based on tax authorities. Okay? So, pag pinagbangga mo yun, may difference na lalabas. Yung difference na yun yung magre-result sa temporary difference. That could either be a deferred tax asset or deferred tax liability. Depende doon sa difference. Mamaya natin i-discuss kapag nasa specific temporary differences na tayo. Okay. Sa receivable naman, if receiving payment for the receivable has no tax consequence, its tax base is equal to its carrying amount, so ang labas ay walang temporary difference. Pero kapag yung pag-receive ng payment ay may tax consequence, kasi generally meron naman talaga, lalo na kapag kunyari yan ay yan ay accounts receivable. Kasi 'di ba sa point of view ng taxation, saka lang nila ita-tax kapag na-kolekta na. Ganun. Okay, not unless merong ibang basis. Okay? So, ang mangyari dyan, kung may tax consequence, of course, may difference. Okay? Kasi, sa point of view ng accounting, meron ng revenue. Pero sa point of view ng taxation, wala pa. So, may revenue na dito, so may amount dito sa tax base, wala pa. So, may difference. Okay? So, meron tayong difference, meron tayong basis for computing deferred taxes. Okay? So, ganun yung consideration natin dyan. Okay, next tayo. Goodwill. Okay, if goodwill is not recognized for tax purposes, okay, its tax base is 0. Okay? Kasi wala ka namang madededuct in the future. Diba? Take note, goodwill is an asset. Ang asset can be recognized as a future deductible item kung siya ay pwedeng ma-amortize, kasi sa ibang bansa mayroon pang nag-amortize ng goodwill eh. Pero din kapag na-impair siya, i-recognize siya as impairment loss, edi i-recognize sa ating tax return as a deduction. Pero pag wala daw siyang hindi siya nire-recognize as deduction, edi 0 ang tax base niya. Okay? So in that case, wala tayong i-recognize na wala tayong i-recognize na temporary difference. Kasi never naman pala siyang ma-recognize. Okay? Yan. O revenue in advance ulit. O dun sa revenue in advance natin, if the revenue is taxed on receipt but deferred for accounting purposes, the tax base of the liability is equal to its carrying amount as there are no future taxable amounts. Okay, yun na, di ba? Sabi nga natin, wala nang ibabawas. Okay, kasi yun na daw yun. Conversely, if the revenue is recognized for tax purposes when the goods or services are received, the tax base will be equal to 0. Bakit siya ulit siya 0? Kasi nandun nga siya sa taas yung recognition natin dito. Ayun. Kaya magiging 0 yung tax base niya. Okay? Yan. Anyway, last tayo yung loans. Example naman sa loans. Okay? Kapag walang tax consequence from the repayment of the loan, the tax base is equal to its carrying amount. So, if the repayment has tax consequence naman, okay, the tax consequence of repayment at carrying amount is adjusted against the carrying amount to determine the tax base. Okay? So, generally, ang gagawin mo lang dyan, kung loans yan, ang una mong gagawin, alamin mo kung magkano yung loan. Okay? Loans payable kasi ang usapan dito, loans payable. So, kung loans payable yan, ito ang category mo. Ganyan. Kunin mo yung carrying amount, ibawas mo yung deductible in the future. Okay, deductible amount sa ating pag-compute ng income tax in the future. Okay, so yun yung item niya. Okay, so ibig sabihin, if kunyari the carrying amount is 1 million, i-determine mo magkano yung deductible in the future. So let's say pag binayaran mo lahat, deductible lahat, edi ang tax base mo 0 na. Yun na siya. Pero ang carrying amount mo as is pa rin. So meron pa ring amount to be recognized. Okay, so ganun yun. Okay. Dito na tayo. Yan. Recognition and measurement of deferred taxes na tayo. So mag-start tayo sa deferred tax liabilities. Okay? So, general principle, deferred tax liability is recognized for all taxable temporary differences. Okay? There are 3 exceptions to the requirements to recognize deferred tax liability. Ito lang yung exceptions niya. Okay? Liabilities arising from initial recognition of goodwill, liabilities arising from the initial recognition of asset or liability other than in a business combination. Okay? And liabilities arising from temporary difference associated with investments in subsidiaries, branches, and associates. Okay? So, yan yung mga items na hindi magre-result, okay, sa taxable temporary difference. Okay? So, by the way, ano ba kasi ang taxable temporary difference? Okay? So, ano yung mga sources? Okay? Sources of, lagyan na lang natin dito. Sources of taxable temporary difference. Okay? Number 1 is if the carrying value of asset is greater than the tax base. Second is kapag carrying value of liability is less than the tax base. Third is kapag income state, this is balance sheet approach. Ay, wag na lang. Statement of financial position approach. Kasi ang tinitignan mo dito yung amount sa sa statement of financial position. Ito rin. Okay? Tapos kapag accounting income, accounting or financial income is greater than taxable income. Okay? So, yan. So, kapag mas mataas yung accounting income kaysa taxable income, ibig sabihin merong deferred tax liability. Okay? So, yan. So, yan lang ang mga usual na kailangan mong bantayan dyan. Ito, ang tawag dito, ito yung income statement approach or statement of comprehensive income approach. Kasi ang tinitignan mo, yung effect niya dun mismo sa ating income statement. Okay? So, yan lang. Para hindi ka malito. But of course, again, remember itong tatlong to, yan yung hindi mag-result sa taxable temporary difference. Kasi these are from initial recognition. Okay? Lahat, pansinin mo, lahat to, these are initial recognitions. Initial recognition ng goodwill, initial recognition in a business combination, and investment in subsidiaries, branches, and associates. Kasi effectively, these are also going to result in business combination later. Okay? Yan. So, yun yung mga consideration natin. Okay? But again, dito, ang tandaan mo dito, but only to the extent that the entity is able to control the timing of the reversal of the differences and it is probable that the reversal will not occur in the foreseeable future. Okay? So, therefore, if there are temporary differences arising in the investment in subsidiaries, branches, and associates or joint arrangements, okay? Pero hindi siya controllable nung person na may control, okay, or nung investor, then it can still be a source of temporary difference. Okay? Kasi siya automatic na magre-reverse, okay? So yun yung ibig sabihin natin diyan. Pero generally ito lang yung kailangan mong tandaan. Okay? So may example na binigay dito. Okay, yun din lang naman yung tinutukoy dito sa taas. Okay? Punta tayo ngayon sa deferred tax asset naman. So, kukumpihin ko lang to. Okay? Kasi recognition of deferred tax asset, dito tayo maglagay sources. Bago natin basahin yung taas. Sources of, kasi di ba kapag deferred tax asset, kailangan mo munang hanapin yung deductible temporary difference. So, sources of deductible temporary difference. Babaliktarin mo lang to. Yung asset naman ay less than. Yung liability naman ang greater than. Okay? Di ba tingnan mo, kapag yung carrying value ng liability ay mas mataas kaysa sa tax base, ibig sabihin, for purposes of financial accounting, nagbawas ka na. Pero sa tax base, for tax purposes, hindi pa siya nagbawas. So, ibig sabihin, sa future pa siya mababawas, kaya deductible. Okay? Dito naman, carrying value ng asset, mas mababa kaysa sa tax base, kasi ibig sabihin, mas malaki yung binawas mo doon sa financial accounting kaysa doon sa ibinawas mo dapat for tax purposes. So, ibig sabihin, meron pang sa future, i-deduct pa for tax purposes. Okay? Tapos dito naman, baliktarin mo rin to. The accounting income is less than, okay, the taxable income. Bakit? Bakit siya magiging less than? Kasi, mas marami kang binawas na expense dito kaysa sa binawas for tax purposes. So in other words, meron kang dineduct na dito na i-deduct pa lang sa future. Kaya deductible. Okay? Tapos meron pa unused tax losses and tax credits. So yan yung pang-apat. Yan lang naman yung mga items natin dyan. Okay? So ganun yun din lang yung i-discuss dito. Okay? Shortcutin lang natin to kasi medyo pag inisa-isa mo pa yan, madami pa yan. Okay? So, para hindi ka na lang mahirapan, ito lang ang susundan mo. Okay? Basta hanapin mo lang yung situation na ito. Okay. Ngayon, kung gusto mong i-memorize kunyari, or kung gusto mong mas madali kang pag-compute later on, ang isa-suggest ko, ang i-memorize mo na lang yung deductible. Tapos ang gagawin mo na lang, baliktarin mo na lang tong mga greater than, less than. Yun na yung taxable. Tapos tanggalin mo yung number 4. Diba? So, yun lang naman yung consideration natin dyan. Okay? Yan. Punta na tayo sa measurement of deferred taxes. Okay? So, paano ulit ang measurement ng deferred taxes? Basic lang naman yun. Okay? So, basta ang gagawin lang dito, kunin mo ulit yung tax base, multiply mo lang yung tax rate. Okay? Yun lang siya. So, ang kailangan lang tandaan dito, deferred tax asset and liabilities cannot be discounted. In other words, kahit long term yan. Okay, mag-reverse siya in 5 years, 4 years, etc. Hindi mo siya isa-subject sa present value computation. Okay? Bakit? Huwag mo nang awayin yung standard. Okay? Kasi ganun din naman eh. For tax purposes, ang gobyerno, hindi naman nila dinidiscount o hindi naman nila pine-present value yung kanilang mga taxes. Okay? Kaya sundan mo na lang yung requirement ng ating standard. Okay? Yun siya. Kasi wala ka din naman talagang authority or right to subject that to present value. Okay? Yan. So, ano ngayon ang amount of income tax to be recognized? Okay? So, di ba sabi nga natin, generally, dalawa lang yan. Okay? Kung gusto mong makuha yung total, okay, total tax to recognize for the period, also known as your income tax expense. Okay? Kunin mo yung current tax expense, idagdag mo yung deferred taxes. Okay? Or yung movements in deferred taxes. So, kapag may nadagdag na deferred tax expense, ididagdag siya. Kapag may bawas sa deferred tax expense, deduction din. Pero kapag benefit yan, kapag may nadagdag na benefit, bawas. Kapag may nabawas na benefit, dagdag. Okay? So, medyo magkabaliktad lang yung dalawang yan. Kasi, para hindi ka lang malito ha. Kasi take note, ang deferred tax expense nga siya, di ba? So, ibig sabihin, directly related siya sa current tax expense. Ang benefit, inverse ang relationship nila. Okay, so yun yung items natin. Okay. Next, where to recognize income tax for the period. Okay, where to recognize income tax for the period. Consistent with the principle of the underlying principles in IAS 12, the tax consequences of transactions and other events are recognized in the same way as the items giving rise to those tax consequences. Accordingly, current and deferred tax is recognized as income or expense and included in profit or loss for the period, except to the extent that the tax arises from transactions or events, okay, that are outside profit or loss. Okay, so ibig sabihin, kung yung deferred tax ay P&L, edi pwede mo siyang i-recognize din sa P&L later on. Okay? Or kapag yung item recognized in P&L, then the deferred taxes will also be applied in P&L later on. Kung OCI din siya. Kumbaga, sundan mo lang yung classification. So, eventually, kapag nag-reverse siya, saan mo daw ito take effect yung income tax? Okay? Syempre, example, revaluation surplus. Okay? Kapag revaluation surplus yan, di ba ang revaluation surplus OCI? So yung effect ng deferred tax liability later on, doon mo ibabangga sa OCI item. Hindi siya sa P&L ipapasok later on. Okay? So ganun lang naman yung example niya. Okay? So in the case of business combination naman, okay, in which case the tax amounts are recognized as identifiable assets or liabilities and accordingly effectively taken into account in the determination of goodwill, then applying IFRS 3 naman. Okay? So ganun din lang siya. So basta be consistent lang kung paano mo tinreat yung mismong asset. Okay, yung effect ng tax or yung tax effect niya doon din ma-reflect. Okay, so kung PNL, PNL, kung OCI, OCI. Okay? Kung sa business combination yan, although di-discuss yan sa AFAR, basta ang concept niyan, kung yan ay adjustment, kung yung adjustment ay ginawa sa asset, okay, tignan mo kung saan i-apply yung adjustment sa asset. Kung yung asset na yun eventually madi-depreciate tapos papasok sa PNL, then the deferred tax will also be applied in the PNL later on. Okay? So ganun siya. So, may mga examples ulit na binigay dito pero same din lang yun. Meron na kasi tayong ginawang example dun sa ating mga materials. Okay? Dun sa Q&A later. Okay? Presentation, basically you just present it in the statement of financial position. Current tax or all current taxes, okay, or of course recognized as assets and liabilities, okay, and they are always recognized as current kapag babayaran na syempre. Pero for deferred taxes, ang lagi mong tatandaan, deferred taxes are always recognized as non-current items. Okay, they are always non-current items, and even if it is going to be realizable currently, it will remain to be part of the non-current item. Okay, so yun lang yung tandaan mo dyan. Okay. Tapos, same lang ulit yung sinabi natin kanina. Kung related sa PNL, PNL din dapat yung effect ng deferred tax. Kung OCI, OCI din. Okay. Tapos, never ino-offset, Okay? So sabi dito, deferred tax assets and deferred tax liabilities can only be offset in the statement of financial position if the entity has the legal right to settle current tax amounts on a net basis and the deferred tax amounts are levied by the same taxing authority on the same entity or different entities that intend to realize the asset and settle the liability at the same time. Again, sa Philippines, hindi yan applicable, kaya hindi natin ino-offset. Okay? Kaya sa Pilipinas, hindi mo pwedeng sabihin na, ay sir, meron naman akong tax credit, pwede bang hindi ko nabayaran tong utang na to? Walang ganun. Okay? Hindi nag-offset ang Pilipinas ng taxes. Kaya hindi rin lang to applicable sa Philippine CPA. Disclosure requirements, again, just like what we said before, you can simply read through, but I do not expect the BOA to ask questions relating to disclosure requirements because it is simply unfair for you to just memorize this. This is not a test of your expertise, okay? Kasi kahit yung mga accountant na professional accountants, these are line items for purposes of checking only. These are not supposed to be memorized. Okay? Nakalagay yan sa working paper at saka dun sa audit procedures nila. Kung meron kong kompleto lahat to. So basically, hindi dapat yan tinatanong sa board exam. Okay? Basahin mo lang. Again, ano ulit ang suggestion ko dito? Pag may lumabas sa board exam na question, ang lagi mo lang tatandaan, hanapin mo yung pinaka-feeling mo irrelevant doon sa mga items. Okay? So based on the topic, kung ano yung pinaka-irrelevant na item, o yung feeling mo parang, bakit kailangan to? Bakit kailangan to? Ganyan, di ba? Kung hindi naman siya makakatulong sa pag-intindi natin doon sa pag-intindi natin doon sa particular na dinidisclose, then yun na malamang yung answer. Okay, so ang maganda dyan, basahin mo lang siya, siguro mga once or twice para lang at least malaman mo yung wordings na ginagamit. Tapos at least maintindihan mo. Pero again, it's going to be totally unfair kung isasama pa to sa board examination. Although noon kasi yung old na BOA meron eh. Kapag nahugot sa test bank, wala tayong magagawa. Okay? So yun siya. Okay, other required disclosure, details of deferred tax asset and tax consequences of future dividend payments. Okay, in addition, di-disclose din daw natin yung um, ating current tax and deferred taxes sa statement of financial position kasi syempre provided siya sa presentation of financial statements. Okay? So proper presentation lang naman tayo. Okay, so that's it for the discussion. Okay, so let's proceed with the theory questions relating to IAS 12. Okay? So number 1 tayo. IAS 12 is entitled. Ano ang title ng IAS 12? Letter A, Income Taxes. Number 2, IAS 12 accounts for deferred taxes under the. Okay, so ano ba ang priority ng IAS 12? Are we focusing on the valuation in the income statement or are we focusing on the valuation in the balance sheet? Okay? The answer there is letter C. Okay? Balance sheet liability method tayo. Okay? So, in other words, nagfo-focus tayo doon sa pagde-determine kung magkano yung nai-recognize na utang doon sa ating balance sheet. Okay? Tapos, by doing that, we are also able to determine magkano yung deferred portion, magkano yung current portion, okay? Tapos magkano yung tamang valuation doon for tax purposes. Okay? So, letter C ang sagot natin dyan. Next tayo. Question number 3. Statement 1, timing difference encompasses temporary difference. And statement number 2, temporary difference encompasses timing difference. Okay? So, obviously, ang pwede mo na lang sagutin dyan is either letter B or letter C. Ano ba ang mas malawak? Okay? So, ang concept kasi dyan, when you talk about temporary difference, okay? Temporary difference is not only talking about timing difference, but it also talks about the valuation differences. Okay? So, meron tayong temporary difference as a result of two items. Number 1, yung timing kung kailan magre-reverse yung isang item. And number 2, yung valuation. Okay? Valuation na nire-recognize for tax purposes and for accounting purposes. Okay? That's why, when there is a temporary difference, it can be a result of timing and it also can be a result of the valuation. So, ang sagot is letter C, mas malawak ang temporary difference. Okay, actually, kung titingnan mo nga yung buong standard, bihira lang sinasabi yung timing difference. Minsanan lang siyang diniscuss dun sa full standard natin. Okay, so letter C sagot dyan. Next tayo, number 4. Number 4, first statement, IAS 12 requires that deferred tax asset should be recognized when it is probable that taxable profits will be available against which the deferred tax asset can be utilized. In other words, mag-recognize ka lang ng deferred tax asset if you are expecting that it can be used or it is usable as a tax credit or as a deduction in future periods na meron kang profit. Okay, kasi take note, there are certain temporary differences, particularly yung ating unused tax losses at saka yung mga tax credits na may limit as to hanggang kailan lang siya pwedeng magamit. Okay? So in other words, kung yung tax loss mo or yung tax credit mo based on the projected figures, hindi mo siya magagamit. Okay? Kasi parang ang labas, kunyari hanggang 3 years lang. Projected mo after 3 years, loss ka pa rin. So, wala naman na siyang papagbabanggaan, di ba? So, in other words, hindi mo rin siya magagamit. Then, wala kang benefit na makukuha. So, therefore, wala kang i-recognize doon. Okay? So, ganun lang yan. Pero correct, ang sagot dyan, correct itong statement na to. Statement 2, where an entity has a history of tax losses, the entity recognizes a tax or deferred tax asset only to the extent that the entity has sufficient taxable temporary differences or there is convincing other evidence that sufficient taxable profit will be available. Ito yung sinasabi natin kanina. Okay? Yan yung specific example nung nandun sa statement 1. Okay, so the answer for number 4 is both statements are correct. Okay, statement number 5 tayo. Okay. IAS 12 prohibits the recognition of deferred tax liabilities and deferred tax asset arising from certain assets or liabilities whose carrying amount differ on initial recognition from their initial tax base. Di ba yan yung kanina natin diniscuss, yung initial recognition ng goodwill, initial recognition sa business combination, di ba? So, yun yung mga sinabi natin kanina. So, tama yun. Okay? Statement 2, circumstances do not give rise to timing differences will not result to deferred taxes. Again, sinabi natin, hindi lang timing difference ang consideration for deferred taxes. Dapat yung kasama din yung valuation difference, also known as yung total temporary difference. So, ang sagot ay false yung statement 2. So, the answer is letter B. Okay. Next tayo. Number 6. Okay. Statement 1, IAS 12 discourages but does not prohibit the discounting of deferred taxes. Okay? 'Di ba sinabi doon sa standard kanina sa discussion natin, bawal, okay? So hindi lang dinidiscourage, talagang pinagbabawal 'yan. So letter false 'yon. Statement 2, IAS 12 prohibits the reclassification of deferred tax assets and liabilities from current to non-current when the items are to be realized or settled within the next period. Okay? Sabi, prohibits the reclassification of deferred taxes and liabilities from current to non-current, okay, when the items are to be realized or settled within the next period. Incorrect pa rin siya. Okay? Kasi ang sinabi natin kanina sa statement 2, okay, bawal i-reclassify from non-current to current. Kaya siya false. Okay? So, letter D ang sagot dyan. Both are incorrect pa rin. Number 7. First statement, IAS 12 is entitled Accounting for Income Taxes. Mali nga yan. Income taxes lang yung title. Statement 2, the objective of IAS 12 is to prescribe the accounting treatment for income taxes. True na yan. Okay? So, letter C ang sagot. Number 8. The principal issue, okay, the principal issue in accounting for income taxes is how to account for the current and future tax consequences of, number 1, the future recovery of the carrying amount of the asset or liability that are recognized in an entity statement of financial position. Yes. Okay? In other words, yung computation natin ng temporary differences. Next, transactions and other event in the current period that are recognized in the entity's financial statement. Yes, transactions and other events pertain to your income statement items. Okay, that could affect your income tax expense, current tax expense, and deferred taxes. So the answer is letter C, both 1 and 2. Okay, we go to number 9. Okay, number 9, first statement. It is inherent in the recognition of an asset or liability that the reporting entity expects to recover or settle the carrying amount of the asset or liability. Of course, di ba? Yun lang naman ang gagawin mo. Sa asset, i-recover mo. Sa liability, i-settle mo. Okay? Statement 2, if it is probable that recovery or settlement of the carrying amount will make future tax payments larger or smaller than they would be if such recovery or settlement were to have no tax consequences, IAS 12 requires an entity to recognize a deferred tax liability or deferred tax asset with certain limited exceptions. Okay, that is also correct. Okay? So, in other words, kapag nag-expect ka na magkakaroon ka ng deferred taxes dyan, okay, you're going to recognize the amount that you are expecting to recover or you're expecting to settle in the future. Okay? So, that's A. Both are correct. Okay, number 10. First statement, IAS 12 requires an entity to account for the tax consequences of transactions and other events in the same way that it accounts for the transaction and other events themselves. In other words, PNL to PNL, OCI to OCI. So, that's correct. Yun din yung pagkaka-explain dyan sa statement 2. Kaya both are correct. 11, Statement 1, the recognition of deferred tax asset and liabilities in a business combination affect the amount of goodwill arising in the business combination or the amount of bargain purchase gain recognized. Yes. Diba? Kasi kasama yun sa assets or liabilities na i-recognize natin. Okay, so true yun. Okay? Tapos, IS-12 with the recognition of deferred tax asset arising from unused tax losses or unused tax credits, the presentation of income taxes in the financial statement and disclosure. Dapat IS-12 deals with. Deals with. Okay? So, correct yan. Both are correct. Okay, number 12, for purposes of IS-12, income taxes include all domestic and foreign taxes which are based on taxable profits. Basta ang tatandaan mo lang dito, pag sinabi nating income taxes. Okay? Regardless kung yan ba ay foreign, kung yan ba ay domestic, okay? Basta ang basis niya or ang tinataksan is yung profit or yung taxable profit. Kasama yan sa coverage ng IS-12. Kaya nga kapag yan ay subject sa final taxes and other taxes that are not based on income or not based on taxable profits, hindi yan covered ng IS-12. Okay, so yung mga capital gains tax, final taxes, yung mga yon hindi siya kasama. Okay? Statement 2, IS-12 does not deal with the methods of accounting for government or investment tax credits, nor does it deal with the accounting for temporary difference that may arise from such grants or investment tax credit. Siyempre kasama, may mga temporary difference daw eh. So, ibig sabihin, i-cover na yung temporary differences. So, letter B ang sagot. Okay. So, ito yung mga other definitions lang ulit. So, it is the profit for a period before deducting tax expense that is known as your accounting profit. Take note, ang ginamit na term kasi sa standard is accounting profit, hindi financial profit. Accounting profit. Kasi basically, gusto lang nang ma-distinguish yung accounting at saka tax profit. Okay, so yun tayo doon. Next. It is the profit for a period determined in accordance with the rules established by taxation, edi tax profit. Okay? Next, it is the aggregate amount included in the determination of profit or loss for the period in respect to current tax and deferred tax. In other words, yung pinagsamang dalawang to. Yung pinagsamang yan, ang tawag dyan ay tax expense. Okay? Yun ang term na ginamit na tax expense. Hindi income tax expense, tax expense lang. Okay? Usually, ginagamit din yung total tax expense. Pero ang standard na ginagamit sa standard tax expense lang. Kapag naman number 16, ang pinag-uusapan lang is yung payable for the period, current tax expense yan. Letter C. Okay? Number 17, yung amounts that are payable in future periods, edi deferred tax liabilities. Okay? Kapag recoverable in future periods, deferred tax asset. Okay? Question, which of the following is not a source of deferred tax asset? Okay? Di ba ang laman ng deferred tax asset lang natin ay yung nilista natin na 4 doon kanina. So, hanapin mo yung hindi sagot. Ang sagot ay letter B, assets having higher carrying amounts than tax base. Di ba kapag mas mataas yung carrying amount kaysa tax base ng asset, yan ay taxable temporary difference. So, hindi siya magiging deferred tax asset, deferred tax liability to. So, letter B ang sagot. Okay? So, yan. Next tayo. Number 20, these are differences between the carrying amount of an asset or liability in the statement of financial position and its tax base. Temporary difference ang tawag doon. Basta magkaiba. Okay? These are differences that will result in taxable amounts, edi taxable temporary difference. Differences that will result in deductible amounts later on, deductible temporary difference. Okay? 23, the tax base of an asset or liability is the amount attributed to that asset or liability for tax purposes. Ito yung sinabi nating nakakatawang definition kanina. Correct yan. Tax expense comprises current and deferred. Correct din yan. Letter A. 24, first statement, the tax base of an asset is the amount that will be deductible for tax purposes against any taxable economic benefits that will flow to an entity when it recovers the carrying amount of the asset. Yan ang definition ng tax base ng asset. Okay? Kapag the tax benefits are not tax or the economic benefits are not taxable, then the tax base is equal to its carrying amount. In other words, there is no difference. So as a result, walang temporary difference. So ang sagot ay letter A. Both are correct. 25 tayo. First statement, the tax base of a liability naman daw is its carrying amount less any amount that will be deductible for tax purposes in respect of the liability in future periods. That is correct, but again, we need to recognize that it is different for revenues received in advance. Kapag revenues received in advance, ano ulit yung sinabi natin? Kunin mo yung carrying amount less the amounts that will not be taxable in future periods. So that is going to be letter A. Correct din. Okay. So 26, anong gagawin natin? Hanapin doon natin yung tax base. Okay? So yung asset, ang cost ay 300. Depreciation niya is 100. Okay? So 200,000 ang carrying amount. The accumulated depreciation for tax purposes is 180. Okay? So ang tax base natin is 300 minus 180, 120. Letter A. Okay, so yun yung sagot. Next. Number 27. Okay. Meron tayong product warranty liability amounting to 10,000. Inaccrue na daw siya, pero the product warranty are not tax deductible until paid out to customers. So in other words, ang tax base natin ay 0 pa. Okay? Okay, kasi carrying amount is 100,000, pero sa future pa i-deduct, so 10,000 minus 10,000 din. Okay, kasi 10,000 is the amount that is deductible in the future, di ba? So the answer there, tax base is 0, carrying amount is 100, the carrying amount of the liability is higher than the tax base, so it is going to result in a deductible temporary difference of 10,000 na mismo. Letter A. 28. Under IAS 12 income taxes, deferred tax assets and liabilities are measured at the tax rates that are expected to be applied kung kailan siya magre-reverse or kailan siya marirealize, masisettle, etc. So the answer is letter D. Okay, so yan yun. Next tayo. 29. In jurisdictions where the impairment of goodwill is not tax deductible, then, letter A. IAS 12 does not permit the application of deferred tax accounting to goodwill. Bakit? Kasi wala namang mag-a-accrue or wala namang ma-apply in future periods since wala naman palang impairment of goodwill. So yun ang labas doon, kung wala tayong makukuhang benefit or wala naman tayong i-expect na tax effect for the goodwill, then wala na ring deferred tax na mako-compute for the goodwill. Okay? So, yun siya. 30. Okay, so the company revalued an item of property plant. Ang cost is 10,000, fair value 15,000. Tax rate is 30%. So, in other words, meron tayong difference na 5,000. The 5,000 is going to be realized as a source of deferred tax liability later on. Bakit? Kasi the carrying amount is 15. The tax base is 10. So, may 5,000 na difference times 30%. That's going to be 1.5 letter D. Okay, so yung sagot natin sa 30. 31, when a deferred tax asset is subsequently recognized by an acquirer, the following adjustment is made. Okay? So, deferred tax asset in-acquire or recognized by an acquirer, what are you going to do? Letter B. You reduce the carrying amount of the goodwill. Okay? So, yun ang kanyan. Saan ko lang ba nakuha yung question na yun? I think this is AICPA adapted. 32. Deferred tax assets must be recognized for deductible temporary differences and for tax losses, but only to the extent that are expected to be benefited from, okay, later on. So, ang sagot is letter C. It is to the extent that it is likely that future deductible expenses will be incurred. Okay, in other words, kung to the extent na magagamit mo siya. Kasi baka hindi mo naman pala magamit. 33, on April 1, 20X5, the company rate of income tax was changed from 35 to 30. Okay? At the previous reporting date, nag-report siya ng balances of deferred tax asset na 26,250 tapos deferred tax liability na 21,000. What is the impact of the tax rate change on income tax expense? Okay? So later on, 'di ba? Kasi ang labas diyan mag-change itong dalawang 'to. Okay? So yung deferred tax asset, okay? Kunin na lang natin yung difference. Labas lang tayo calculator. Okay? So that's going to be 26,250. Okay? Pagkatapos, bawas natin yung 21. Okay? So, meron tayong ini-expect na benefit na 5 to 50. Kaso, napalitan daw from 35, naging 30 na lang daw. Okay? So, in other words, times 0.05 tayo dito, may difference na for purposes of change in income tax expense muna, income tax expense. Okay? So ano ang ini-expect nating mangyari diyan? So since ang tawag dito, since yung tax rate ay bumaba, expect sana natin diyan is bababa din yung income tax, di ba? Pero ang labas kasi may mga deferred tax asset kang na-recognize. So in other words, bababa yung benefit na makukuha mo from this particular deferred tax. Okay? So, kunin natin muna yung 26,250. Multiply natin ng 0.05. Okay, wait lang. Bakit? Change from 35. At the previous reporting date, June 30, 20X4. Okay. Meron siyang tax balances. So, 26,250 divided by 0.35. So, 75,000 yung result nun. Tapos, 21,000 divided by 0.35, 60,000. So, 75 at saka 60,000. Okay. So, 75,000 minus 60,000. Okay. Times 0.3. So, 4,500. From 4,500 na lang siya. Dati 5,250. So, 5,250 minus 4,500. 750 ang increase. Letter A. Okay? So, kasi kailangan nating balikan eh. Okay? So, babalikan natin. Yung 26,250, divide natin siya ng 0.35 kasi yun yung original. So, originally, deferred tax asset is 75. The deductible temporary difference is 75,000. Work back. Okay? Tapos yung deferred tax liability, 21,000 divided by 0.35, that's 60,000. So, kung 75,000 minus 60,000 times 0.35, 5,250 yung net effect natin. Okay? 5,250. Pero kung gagamitin natin yung 30% sa 15,000 times 0.3, magiging 4,500 na lang siya. So yung dating 5,250 magiging na net benefit kasi mas mataas yung deferred tax asset. 5,250 na net benefit, magiging 4,500 na lang na net benefit. So 750 yung matatapyas na benefit. So in other words, tataas yung income tax natin ng 750. Letter A. Okay, yun siya. Okay, next. 34. Balchin Limited had the following deferred tax balances at reporting date. So deferred tax asset 12, deferred tax liabilities 30. Effective from the first day of the next financial period, the income or the company tax rate was reduced from 40 to 30. The adjustment to income tax expense to recognize the impact of the rate change is. Okay, so this case naman, um, yung deferred tax liability natin, mas mataas. Okay? So, change ulit tayo kasi ito, na-compute ito based on 40%, di ba? So, pwede naman kunin na muna, ibalik na lang ulit natin. Compute ulit tayo. So, 12,000 divided by 0.4, that's 30,000. 30,000 divided by 0.4, that's 75. So, 75 minus 30,000, that's 45,000 times 0.3. So, that's 13,500. So, kapag 0.3 ang gagamitin natin, 13,500. Okay? Kapag yung 45,000, multiply natin ng 0.4, that's 18,000. So, 18,000 minus 13,500, may 4,500 tayong ibabawas. So, credit yun. Okay? Or bawasan natin yung income tax expense ng 4,500. Okay? So, yan. Next tayo. 35. The tax expense related to profit or loss of the period is required to be presented on the face of the income statement, of course. Okay? Letter B. Actually, ang ginagawa dyan, dalawang approach yan. It's either you present it as a total amount, tapos i-disclose mo na lang dun sa notes yung hati-hati niya, or i-present mo yung breakdown niya. Like current tax expense, deferred tax expense, deferred tax benefit, ganun, para makuha mo yung total. So, in any case naman, kahit paano mo siya i-present, kailangan mo pa rin ipakita yung detailed computation. Pero sa face pa rin siyempre pinipresent yan. 36. Unless a company has a legal right of offset, kailangan i-recognize natin separately yung mga deferred items. Okay. So, requires disclosure daw of all of the following. Okay. So, the amount of deferred tax asset recognized, the amount of deferred tax liabilities recognized, the net amount of the deferred tax asset and liabilities recognized, the amount of deferred tax asset relating to tax losses. Okay. Kung mapapansin mo, kung alam mo yung concept na hindi naman talaga dapat ninet, di ba? Actually, sinabi pa nga dyan, no? Unless a company has a legal right to set off. In other words, number 3 will be irrelevant. Bakit mo ininet? Saan mo gagamitin yung net amount? Wala naman palang right to offset, di ba? Hindi relevant yung number 3 na yan. So, letter A ang sagot. This can only be relevant kung you have the right to offset. Kasi you are going to settle at net naman pala. Okay, so number 3 is not part of the answer. So, letter A ang sagot. 1, 2, and 4. 37. Where a business transaction requires a direct adjustment to an equity account, the tax effect is also going to be adjusted in equity. Okay? In other words, OCI. Okay? So, kapag OCI yan, changes will be reflected directly to equity. Income tax will also be reflected directly to equity. Okay. IS-12 prescribes the accounting treatment for income taxes and the tax consequences of transactions of the current period, future liquidation, tax planning opportunities. Wala ito. Tax planning opportunities is not part of the coverage of IS-12. That is part of the tax management system, which is also already part of either MAS or corporate accounting. Okay? So, hindi yan kasama sa coverage ng IS-12. Okay? Letter B lang. 39. If liquidation of carrying amounts will make future tax payments larger or smaller, IS-12 generally requires an undertaking to record a provision. Okay? Letter B. Provision. Okay. Pag sinabi nating provision, okay, kasi sinabi liquidation of the carrying amounts ang pinag-uusapan. The liquidation of carrying amounts will make future tax payments larger or smaller. IS-12 generally requires an undertaking to recognize a provision for the uncertainties in the liquidation. Okay? Kasi, pag ang sinagot mo ay letter A, okay, letter A siya, hindi naman problema yung hindi naman problema yung na-recognize ng deferred tax eh. Okay, ang problema mo yung sa liquidation niya. Okay, so parang kwan lang yan, kasi pwedeng letter A agad ang isagot mo kasi yun yung topic, di ba? Pero ang sagot kasi dyan, ang pinag-uusapan dyan is yung liquidation of the carrying amounts. Okay? So, that's going to be provision. Okay? Kasi hindi mo nga alam kung higher or smaller, di ba? So, kung hindi mo pa alam kung larger or smaller, hindi ka pwedeng mag-recognize ng letter A. Bakit? Di ba sabi natin, deferred tax liability or deferred tax asset can only be recognized if there is already a certainty as to the tax base as compared to the carrying amount, di ba? So, pag hindi pa final, hindi pa pwedeng mag-recognize ng letter A. Ang pwede mong gawin muna is letter B to recognize the portion that is probable, di ba? Tapos kapag na-settle na later on, saka mo ma-finalize yung letter A. So, letter B muna gawin. Okay. Next, 40, permanent differences. Ano ang concept ng permanent difference? Ito yung differences between accounting and tax reports that will never reconcile. Okay? So in other words, pwedeng pang-accounting lang talaga siya, hindi siya talaga mare-report for tax purposes, or pang-tax lang talaga siya, hindi siya pwede for financial accounting. Okay? So, ang permanent difference, anong gagawin mo? Direct deduction lang siya, pero it will never result to deferred taxes. Okay? So, deferred taxes, provisions, or whatever. Letter D ang sagot dyan. None of this. Okay, so ang permanent difference, direct mong binabawas for computation purposes. Or direct mong ina-add back. Okay? Next, 41, permanent differences require adjustments in the letter B, periods relating to the transaction. Okay? So kung ngayon nangyari ang non-taxable transaction or non-deductible transaction, ngayon mo i-adjust. Letter B. 42, deferred taxes or deferred tax asset are the taxes recoverable in future periods in respect of. Okay? Ano yun? Deductible temporary difference, unused tax losses, unused tax credits. Pag taxable, deferred tax liability na yun. Kaya hindi kasama yung number 4. Letter C lang ang sagot dyan. Okay. Next. Deferred tax relates to. Okay? Deferred tax relates to deductible, yes. Unused, yes. Taxable, yes. Permanent difference, no. So, letter D ang sagot, 1 to 4 lang. Deferred taxes reverses over time, of course. Letter A. The use of deferred tax change the date of payment of tax? No. Because the payment of tax is based on the current tax. May change the dates of payment of tax? No again. Okay? Kasi nasa current tax yan. Does not change ang sagot? Letter C. Okay? Kasi yung payment of tax is based on the current tax expense. Kapag nag-compute ka ng deferred tax, that's only for purposes of reflecting the effect of items that are not yet recognized in the tax return. Okay? 46. If the tax already paid exceeds the tax due for the period, the excess will be recorded as an asset. Okay? Para siyang prepaid. Okay? Prepaid portion. Letter C. 47. If revenue is taxed in the period received, the tax base is letter A. Nil. Okay? If revenue is taxed in the period received, o di ang labas na niya, ngayon na tax, ngayon na receive. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, wala nang kukolektahin sa future, edi wala nang tax base. Zero na. Kasi wala naman nang itatax sa future. 48, research and development costs may be expense in the current period but deductible for tax purposes over subsequent periods. The tax base is therefore letter C, the amount that will be deductible in the future. Okay? Letter B. 49, temporary differences arise when there is a difference between the tax base and the carrying amount of the asset. Letter A. 50, a deductible temporary difference generates a deferred tax asset. Kapag taxable temporary difference, it will generate a deferred tax liability. Taxable temporary differences occur when tax is charged in a period, letter B, after the accounting period benefits from the income in the financial accounts. Kaya nga siya taxable kasi for purposes ng accounting, ni-record na niya. Pero for purposes of tax authority, sa future pa. So letter B. Deductible temporary difference naman occurs when tax is charged in the period before nag-benefit. Okay? Kaya nga deductible pa siya in the future kasi hindi pa nagbe-benefit si accounting, nag-benefit na siya or dito, hindi pa nagbe-benefit sa accounting purposes, okay? Pero for tax purposes, nag-recognize na. Okay? So, letter A ang sagot. Before accounting period, benefited or benefits from the income in the financial accounts. Kaya siya deductible in the future. Okay? Differences arising from fair value adjustments are treated, letter A, the same way as other taxable and deductible differences. Wala namang special accounting treatment there. Okay, next tayo. Not all temporary differences are recognized as deferred tax balances. The exceptions are, di ba? So, goodwill, initial recognition, ito yung tatlong nasabi kanina, di ba? Ito lang, 1, 2, and 3. Letter C. Okay, sila yung mga ang tawag dito, sila yung mga items na hindi natin nire-recognizean. Okay, ng deferred taxes on initial recognition and as well as yung mga other investments. Yan yung tatlong item na naka-indicate kanina dun sa discussion natin sa taas. So, letter C. 56, the realization of deferred tax asset depends on the letter B. Taxable profits being available in the future. Bakit? Diba kasi deferred tax asset yan. Ang deferred tax asset binabangga doon sa babayarang tax. So, the amount that you can recognize is only up to the extent na magbe-benefit ka from the future or na pwede siyang maibangga in future taxable amounts. So, B. 57, when different tax rates of tax apply to different types and amounts of taxable income, then ang gagawin mo, letter C. Isa-isahin mong computein. Okay, huwag ka mag-average, masama yan. Siyempre, kanya-kanyang tax yun, kanya-kanyang application. 58, an undertaking should review and record the deferred tax assets, determine whether new conditions will permit the recovery of the asset, letter C, at each balance sheet date, of course. Kasi every year may new transactions, may new events, okay? May new items of na pwedeng ma-defer, so ganun ang gagawin. 59, the carrying amount of a deferred tax asset should be reviewed for changes in tax rates, changes in expected manner of recovery, changes in future profits. Yes din, kasi 'di ba kapag nagkaroon ng changes in expected future profits, pwedeng magkaroon ng effect doon sa ma-apply or ma-recover natin na deferred tax asset. So, letter C ang sagot dyan. 1, 2, and 3. 60, the difference between the carrying amount of a revalued asset and its tax base is a letter A, temporary difference. Last question, number 61, standards require or permit certain items to be credited or charged directly to equity. Examples of such items are, okay, change in carrying amount due to revaluation, OCI yan. An adjustment to the opening balance of retained earnings as a result of errors. Directly to equity kasi retained earnings na yan, di na P&L. A translation adjustment is also going to be OCI. Okay? Tapos, compound financial instrument can also be can also result to items to be recognized in equity, particularly if that is your FVOC securities. So, letter D ang sagot. 1 to 4. Okay, so we proceed with problem portion. First 10 questions relate to determination of the tax base. Okay. So, number 1, an equipment costs 4,000. For tax purposes, the depreciation is 2,400. Was already deducted in the current and prior periods, and the remaining cost will be deductible in future periods. Okay, so the amount deductible in future periods will be the amount recognized as the tax base. Okay, so in this case, if that's 4,000,000, 4,000, bawasan mo ng 2,400, 1,600 pa yung naiwan. So, ang tax base ay 1,600, letter C. Okay. Next, interest receivable. Okay, interest receivable as a carrying amount of 4,000. The related interest rate, the interest revenue will be taxed on a cash basis. How much is the tax base of the asset? Ang tax base, di ba? For purposes of asset, the amount that is going to be deductible in the future, di ba? Ang sagot, meron ka bang i-deduct in the future from the collection of the receivable? Ang sagot ay wala. Kasi itatax mo nga siya in the future, di ba? So, ang sagot, tax base ay 0. Letter D. Okay? Number 3, trade receivables have a carrying amount of 4,000. The related revenue has already been included in taxable profit. Okay? Naidagdag na daw. Okay? So, wala na tayong gagawin. Ang tanong dito ngayon, how much is the tax base of the asset? Okay? So, if it was already recorded, according to the discussion dun sa taas a while ago, the carrying amount and the tax base will be the same. Okay? So, if the carrying amount is 4,000, the tax base is also 4,000. Therefore, there is no temporary difference. Okay? So, letter A ang sagot. Number 5, dividends receivable from a subsidiary of a carrying amount of 4,000. The dividends are not taxable. What is the tax base? So, similar discussion sa taas. If there is no tax consequence, then the carrying amount is going to be the same as the tax base. Therefore, there is no temporary difference. So, ang sagot dyan, 0. 0 ang difference, pero ang tax base mo equal siya sa carrying amount. Letter A. Number 5, a loan receivable as a carrying amount of 4,000. The repayment of the loan will have no tax consequence. So, ganun din lang. Parehas siya sa number 4. For assets, if there is no tax consequence or if it is not taxable, then the carrying amount is the same as the tax base. The answer there is also letter A, 4,000. Okay. Number 6. Current liabilities include accrued expenses with a carrying amount of 4,000. The related expense will be deducted for tax purposes on a cash basis. How much is the tax base of the liability? Okay. So, kapag liability ang usapan natin, generally, pag lahat ng liabilities or all other liabilities, what we are looking for is the amount that has already been deducted, okay? Or that has already been, the tax base is equal to the amount that has already been deducted, okay, for tax purposes. Okay. Ngayon, kapag ikaw ay nag-recognize ng accrued expenses, okay, accrued expenses, okay? So, ang carrying amount daw niya ay 4,000. So, ibig sabihin, nag-debit ka doon ng expense, nag-credit ka ng accrued expense na 4,000. However, the related expense will be deducted for tax purposes on a cash basis. Okay, so in other words, mag-recognize lang ng expense kapag yan ay babayaran in cash, di ba? So, cash basis nga tayo, di ba? So, ang labas ngayon dyan, what is going to be the tax base of the liability? The answer there is going to be 0. Okay, that's going to be 0. If we are going to go back, kasi nasa taas pa kasi yun eh. Wait lang ha. Balikan lang natin sa taas sandali para lang ma-emphasize natin. Kasi ano ba ang category niya? Other liabilities, di ba? So, wait lang. Balikan lang natin para lang ito, other liabilities. The tax base of the liability is its carrying amount less any amount that will be deductible for tax purposes in respect of that liability in the future periods. Eh, di ba ang sinabi? The carrying amount is 4,000 less magkano pa daw yung i-deduct in the future, di ba? Kung tax basis siya, i-deduct pa lang siya in the future. So 4,000 minus 4,000 is going to be 0. That's why the answer in the problem dun sa sinasagutan natin sa baba, 0 din siya. Okay? Kasi 4,000 minus 4,000. Okay. Yun. Next. Interest receivable as a carrying amount of 4,000. The related interest revenue will be taxed on cash basis. So, similar siya dun sa item na... Ay, sorry. Sorry. Ito. Current liabilities include interest revenue received in advance. Okay? With a carrying amount of 4,000, the related interest revenue was taxed on a cash basis. How much is the tax base of the liability? In case of revenue received in advance, that's going to be carrying amount less any amount that will not be deductible in or that will not be taxable in the that will not be deductible in the future. Okay, yun yung nasa taas. Okay? So in that case, carrying amount is 4,000 minus, okay, any amount that will not be deductible in the future, that's going to be 4,000 also. Kasi yung interest revenue, hindi naman talaga siya deductible in the future kasi that's going to be taxable in the future. So the answer is 4,000 minus 4,000. So the tax base is still 0. Number 8, current liabilities include accrued expense with a carrying amount of 4,000. The related expense has already been deducted for tax purposes. So kabaliktaran ng number 6, 'di ba? Carrying amount minus item that is going to be deducted in the future. Okay? So 4,000 minus 0 kasi already been deducted nga. Edi 4,000 ang tax base din. Letter A. Number 9, current liabilities include accrued fines and penalties with a carrying amount of 4,000. Fines and penalties are not deductible for tax purposes. How much is the tax base of the liability? In that case, the carrying amount will be the same as the tax base. So that's going to be 4,000. Parehas lang sila kasi walang temporary difference na mag-a-arise. Okay? And then finally, number 10, a loan payable as a carrying amount of 4,000. The repayment of the loan will have no tax consequence. Again, if there is no tax consequence or if it is not tax deductible later on, then the carrying amount and the tax base will be the same, resulting to zero taxable or zero temporary difference. So the answer there is 4,000 also. Letter A. Okay, so ganun lang yung answer natin dyan sa first items 1 to 10. Proceed tayo dun sa mga basic computations. Okay, basic computations muna tayo para hindi tayo masyadong mabigla agad. Okay, although malamang sanay naman na kayo sa mga ganyan. No? Okay, madali lang to. First question. In 20X5, Eric Corporation reported 90,000 net income before income taxes. The income tax rate is 30%. Eric had an unused 60,000 net operating loss carry forward arising in 20X4 when the tax rate was 35%. This was 20X4, no? 20X5 na eh. The income tax expense Eric would report for 20X5 would be. Okay? So, ano ang gagawin natin dyan? So, syempre, ang nireport natin ng 20X5 is 90,000 net income before tax. Kapag 30% yung tax rate natin, edi that's going to be diretso na lang natin para hindi tayo mahirapan. Kasi ang net operating loss naman natin is 60. Pero ang tinatanong lang naman sa atin, total tax expense, diba? So, kung total tax expense, 90,000, multiply na natin yan ng, anong tax rate? 30%. So, that's 27,000. Letter D. Kasi ang tinatanong naman sa atin is income tax expense eh. So, diretso na. Kung may 90,000, multiply mo ng 30%. Yung 60,000 will have no effect kasi hindi naman tinatanong sa atin yung current tax. Okay? Kapag yung current tax or yung payable, ibang usapan na yun. I-consider na natin siya. Okay? Number 2. Okay? The Gale Corporation reported a 66,000 operating loss in 20X5. Operating loss yun. In the preceding 3 years, Gale reported the following income before taxes and paid the indicated income tax. Pero preceding pa to so wala naman na siyang effect dito. Ang tinatanong ngayon, the amount of tax benefit to be reported in 20X5 arising from the tax carryback provision of the current tax code would be, so kung ito ang tax rate, malamang 35 pa rin yung nag-exist, no? So, ang gagawin natin, multiply natin yung 66,000 ng 35%. So, ang lalabas, 23,100, letter A. So, we are simply going to assume na kung ano yung pinaka-recent na tax rate, yun pa rin yung in effect. So, 66,000 multiply natin ng 35% kasi yun yung enacted nung 20X4. Wala namang binigay na other tax rates. Okay? So, yun. Letter A. Okay. Number 3 tayo. Indie company had taxable income of 12,000 during 20x5. Indie use accelerated depreciation for tax purposes. Ito yung bawas, 3,400. And straight line for accounting purposes, 2,000. Assuming Indie has no other temporary difference, what would the company's pre-tax accounting income be for 20x5? Okay. So, ang gagawin natin dito, taxable income, di ba? So, kung taxable income yon yung 12,000, kaya lumabas yung 12,000 kasi nagbayad ka ng 3,400. Di ba? So, i-add back mo muna yung 3,400. Okay. Tapos, saka mo ibawas yung 2,000. So, ang accounting income mo, 13,400, letter C. Yan. So, kumbaga, ang ginawa lang natin dyan, in-add back natin um, yung depreciation for tax purposes, in-add back natin. Tapos, ang binawas lang natin is yung depreciation for accounting purposes. Para lumabas yung ating pre-tax accounting income, letter C. Okay. Number 4. The following information is taken from Blackhawk Corporation's 20x5 financial records. Okay, so ito yung pre-tax, excess depreciation, ito yung taxable income. Assume the taxable temporary difference was created entirely in 20x5 and will reverse in equal net taxable amounts in each of the next 3 years. If tax rates are 40% in 20x5, 35% 20x6, 35% 20x7, 30% 20x8, then the total deferred tax liability Blackhawk should report is, so ang gagawin mo lang, excess of 45, it's going to reverse daw equally over the next 3 years. So, tag 15. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, kung 20x5 figure to, 20x6 tayo, 35 pa rin. So, 15,000 times 0.35. Ay, hindi. Pati pala sa 20x7, no? 35% din. So, yung 30,000 na lang ang gagawin natin. Diretso. 30,000 times 0.35. Okay. M plus na lang natin yan. Tapos, 30%. So, 15,000 times 0.3. Okay. Plus memory recall. So, that's going to be 15,000 pa rin. Letter B. So, i-multiply mo lang. Di ba? 45,000 divided by 3 years, that's 15,000 each. Kaso nagkataon na parehas sa 35% yung next 2 years. So, 30,000 times 0.35 na lang plus 15,000 times 30%. So, that's letter B, 15,000. Basta ang basic rule mo dyan is you apply or you multiply the tax basis doon sa tax rate that is in effect during the time na magre-reverse siya. Okay. By the way, paano mo na siguro na, kasi pwedeng may choices, pwedeng sa choices may 0. Okay? Kasi baka pala hindi deferred tax liability, baka deferred tax asset pala. Pero sure ka na yan ay liability kasi using the concept na accounting income is greater than taxable income, deferred tax liability yan. So yun. Kaya letter B ang sagot. Okay, number 5 tayo. Okay, number 5, the following information was taken from Buccaneer Corporation. Anong tinatanong sa atin? Assuming no other differences existed between book income and taxable income, what amount did Buccaneer deduct for depreciation on his tax return? Okay, sige. So, pinakita sa atin yung income before income tax na 1,500,000. May current tax expense doon na 564. Ang tax rate daw ay 30%. So, kung 564 yun, divide natin ng 0.3, 1,880 ang ating 1,880 yung taxable income. So, kung 1,880 yun, bawas natin sa 1,500. So, may 380 na difference. Okay? That is, ang sabi kasi doon, Management decided to use accelerated depreciation for tax purposes and the straight line method for financial reporting purposes. The amount charged to depreciation expense in 20x5 was 600. So, diretso na lang tayo doon sa deferred na 36. Sa 36,000 na lang tayo. Divide natin ng 0.3. That's 120. So, kung 600 yung charge for accounting purposes, okay, accounting purposes yon. Tapos, obviously, dapat mas mataas yung depreciation. Tama. Mas mataas dapat yung depreciation kasi accelerated for tax purposes. So, yung 120 na result ng 36,000 na deferred tax, kasi malamang ang sinabi sa problem, yung 36 daw is caused by the difference in depreciation only. So, 36,000 divide natin ng 0.3 kasi yun yung tax rate, lalabas yung 120 at idagdag natin siya dun sa 600,000 na straight line depreciation, 720 ang depreciation na accelerated. Letter D. Okay, number 6 tayo. Warren Corporation began operations in 20x0 and had operating losses of 400,000 in 20x1 and 300,000 in 20x2. Losses yun, ha? Okay. For the year ended December 31, 20x3, okay, Warren had a pre-tax income of 600,000. For 20x1 and 20x2, assume an enacted tax rate of 30%, and for 20x3, a 35% tax rate. There were no temporary differences in any of the years. How much should be reported as income tax expense? Income tax expense ang tinatanong, ha. So, kunin mo lang yung income na 600,000, multiply mo ng 0.35. So, 210, letter D. Yun lang ang tinatanong, income tax expense. Hindi tinatanong yung current tax. Pag current tax, i-consider mo yung mga differences. Okay? Sige. So, yan. Next, 7. Oops. Okay, number 7. On December 31, 20x2, Alton Incorporated reported a current deferred tax liability. Current deferred tax. So, kaya lang siya sinabing current kasi mag-reverse na daw siya. Okay, in the current period, 140. And a non-current deferred tax asset of 40. At the end of 20x3, Alton reported a current deferred tax liability of 100 and a non-current deferred tax liability of 44. The deferred tax expense for 20x3 is, okay? So, actually, obvious naman na yan kasi ang nangyari, di ba, current deferred tax liability na 140, ibig sabihin magre-reverse to. Ang maapektuhan nito is yung income tax expense. It will not affect the current tax expense. Okay? Tapos, yung deferred tax asset daw is non-current. So, ibig sabihin, wala pa naman dito sa 40,000 ang makaka-affect sa current period. Okay? So, wala tayong gagawin dyan. Biglang this year daw, at the end of 20x3, meron kang nirecognize na 100 na current deferred tax liability. Next year, magre-reverse. Tapos non-current, so malamang after next year pa magre-reverse. Ang tinatanong, magkano yung deferred tax expense? Wala namang sinabing increases in deferred tax asset. So malamang, the only item that will result to deferred tax expense is ito. Yung 100 at saka yung 44. Kaya letter A. 144 ang deferred tax expense. Okay? 144 deferred tax expense tayo dyan. Kasi, ang ginawa mo lang naman dyan, i-consider mo kung ano yung mga papasok na deferred item. Okay? Kasi, di ba, ang deferred tax liability, kapag nag-reverse, okay, magiging benefit siya. Tapos yung deferred tax asset naman, kapag nag-reverse, magiging parang taxable siya. Okay? So, ganun yung labas, magbabaliktad, di ba? Pero in this case, kung deferred tax expense ang pinag-uusapan, dapat, ito na yun, 100 at saka 44. Kasi yun lang naman yung makaka-affect talaga for this period na i-recognize for deferred item. Okay, number 8 tayo. Okay, Eden Company had pre-tax accounting income of 24,000 during 20x5. Eden's only temporary difference for 20x5 relates to a sales made in 20x3 and recognized for accounting purposes on that time, pero installment sales method daw for tax purposes. Okay? During 20x5, Eden collected a receivable from 20x3 which resulted in a 6,000 income under the installment sales method. Eden's taxable income would be. Okay? So, ang taxable income therefore is yung 24,000 na accounting income plus yung 6,000 na additional income for installment sales method. So, letter D, 30,000. Okay? Number 9. Legal Corporation paid 20,000 on January of 20x5 for premiums on a 2-year life insurance policy which names the company as the beneficiary. Additionally, Begal Corporation's financial statements for the year ended December 31, 20x5 revealed the company paid 105 in taxes during the year and also incurred estimated losses on disposal of unused plant facility of 200,000. Assuming these facilities were sold on February of 20x6, at which time a 200,000 loss was recognized for tax purposes, and that Begal's tax rate is 30% for both 20x5 and 20x6. What amount should Begal report as asset for net deferred income taxes in its 20x5 balance sheet? Okay. So, ano ang magiging source natin ng deferred tax? Ang tax rate daw natin ay 30%, no? Okay. So, una, yung premiums na 20,000 na binayaran natin, that's going to be a permanent difference. Okay? Because the life insurance policy is generally not considered as an expense for tax purposes. Okay? Additionally, Begal Corporation's financial statements, the company paid 105 in taxes during the year and also incurred estimated losses. Magkano? 200,000. Okay? So, yun yung estimated losses natin. So, for purposes of the 20x5 financial report, meron ka ng 200,000 na ni-recognize. 200,000 na ni-recognize. Pero hindi pa siya i-recognize for tax purposes. Pero may subject na yan na 30% tax rate na 60,000. Okay? So, letter C ang sagot natin. Okay? So, kasi ang ginawa mo dyan, kung nag-estimate ka ng loss, nag-recognize ka na ng accrued expense, di ba? Or ng liability. Pero ang tax base niyan, 0 pa. Kasi saka lang siya ma-recognize kapag actually incurred na or actually na-sustain na yung loss. So, 200,000 na 200,000 na accrue minus 0 na hindi pa ni-recognize for tax purposes. So 200,000 times 30%, that's going to be 60,000. Letter C. Okay. Number 10, Dodger Corporation reported a loss for both financial reporting purposes and tax reporting purposes of 231,000 in 20x5. For financial reporting purposes, Dodger reported income before taxes for years 20x2 hanggang 20x4 at 30% as listed below. How much is the deferred tax asset to be recognized in 20x5? Okay, so yun ang gagamitin mo, 231, multiply mo siya ng 0.3. That's 69,300, letter B. Gamitin mo lang yung tax rate na 30% doon sa loss. Paano mo nalaman na deferred tax asset siya? Kasi nga loss, di ba? Carry over yan. Okay? Times 30%, that's 69,300. Okay? So, yan yung consideration dyan. Next, an analysis of the asset and liabilities of Marie Corporation on December 31 disclosed assets with a tax basis of 1 million and book value basis daw na 1.3. There was no differences in the liability basis. The difference on asset base arose from a temporary difference that would reverse in the following. So pag tinotal mo tong tatlo, dapat 300,000 yan. Okay? The enacted tax rates are 30% for 20x5 to 20x8. So hanggang dito, yung 80,000 hanggang 72,000, 30% i-multiply mo dyan. Tapos, 20x9 at saka 2x10, 35% ang gagamitin mong tax rate. Tinatanong ka, total deferred tax liability on December 31, 20x5 should be. So, sundan mo lang yung sinabi natin. 80,000 times 30%, 70,000 times 30%, 72,000 times 30%. Or basically, pagadin mo na lang yun. 80,000 plus 70,000 plus 72,000 is equal to 222 times 0.3. That's going to be 66. 80,000 nawala. Plus 70,000 plus 72,000 is 222,000 times 0.3. That's 66,600. Memory plus na lang natin yon. 40,000 plus 38,000. That's 78,000 times 0.35. That's 27,300. Idagdag natin siya doon sa 66,600. Ang lalabas 93,900. So yun lang. Sundan mo lang yung ating tax rates that are enacted already. Okay. Number 12. Okay. Number 12 tayo. Schaefer Products Incorporated reported an excess of warranty expense over warranty deductions of 72,000 for the year ended December 31, 20x5. This temporary difference will reverse in equal amounts over the years 20x6 to 20x8. So, 3 years. 72,000 divided by 3. That's going to be... Divided by 3 dapat. That's 24,000 per year. Okay? The reporting of this temporary difference at December 31 would be, so obviously this is warranty, this is liability, carrying amount is greater than tax base, so that's going to be a deferred tax asset. Ang tanong magkano? So since 24,000 equally every year, starting 20x6, so 24,000 times 35%, 24,000 times 30%, 24,000 times 35%. Okay? Ang lalabas dyan ay, actually, pag ginawa mo yan, parang 30% din lang lahat. Tama ba? Oo. Kasi parang ang labas, yung 35 dito, sobra ng 5. Yung 25 dito, kulang ng 5. So, pag nilipat mo yung 5% dito, parang ang labas, mag-i-equal din lang siya na 30%. Multiplication naman tayo eh. So, in effect, parang 30% din lang yung tax rate all throughout. Kaya 21,600. Pero syempre, kung ayaw mong maniwala dun sa solution ko, ang gawin mo, 24,000 times 35% plus 24,000 times 30% plus 24,000 times 25%. So, letter B ang sagot. Yan. Okay. 13. On December, in 20x6, the Wharf Company reported pre-tax financial income of 500,000. Included in that pre-tax financial income was 90,000 of non-taxable life insurance proceeds received as a result of the death of the officer. Okay, so yung 500,000 na yan, nakasama sa pre-tax income, may kasama daw dyan na 90,000 insurance proceeds. So tanggalin na natin yung 90,000. Hindi naman subject sa tax yan. Okay? May kasama daw na 120,000 of warranty expense accrued but unpaid as of December 31. So, mag-result yan ng deferred tax asset and 20,000 of life insurance premiums for a policy for an officer. Okay? So, malamang yun, hindi rin ulit yon deductible. Assuming that no income taxes were previously paid during the year and assuming an income tax rate of 40%, the amount of income tax payable on December 31, 20x6 would be. Okay? So ito yung pre-tax natin. Ang gagawin lang natin is ibabawas natin yung 90,000. Tapos i-add back natin yung 20,000 na binawas. Kasi hindi dapat pinabawas yun. Pagkatapos, tax rate is 40%. Oh wait. Anong sinabi doon? 120,000 of warranty expense accrued but unpaid. Tapos ang tinatanong sa atin, income tax. Ay, payable, sorry. Income tax payable pala ang tinatanong. So, kung income tax payable, ang hinahanap natin dyan is yung ating tawag dito, taxable income. So, balik tayo. 500,000 dito. Itanggalin natin yung 90,000 kasi hindi naman talaga yon taxable. Tapos, i-add back natin yung 20,000 na insurance premium kasi hindi naman yung deductible. Pagkatapos, i-add back din natin yung 120,000 na warranty kasi hindi pa naman yon ibabawas for tax purposes. So, kumbaga, hinahanap natin yung taxable income. Kasi yung taxable income, yun yung isa-subject mo sa 40% para makuha mo yung payable. So, ang payable natin is 220,000. Okay? So, again, kung ang tinatanong sa atin ay income tax payable, ang hinahanap natin dyan yung taxable income. So, para makuha mo yung taxable income, ang gagawin mo dyan is kailangan mong hanapin yung amount of income that was computed by the taxing authorities. Okay? So, may mga workback tayong gagawin. So, in this case, kung 500,000 yan at may kasama daw siyang 90,000 na non-taxable life insurance, ibabawas natin kasi hindi naman siya matataksan. So, if the proceeds is non-taxable, yung life insurance premiums, dapat hindi din siya deductible. Okay? Kasi hindi naman siya relating to the operations of the company. Permanent difference. So, minus tong 90, add back yung 20. Yung warranty expense na accrued but not paid, this is not yet deductible for tax purposes. Kasi kailangan, for tax purposes, is actual na babayaran muna. So, i-add back mo ulit tong 120. Kaya ang lalabas ay 550. 550,000 times 40%, 220. Letter D. Okay? Number 14, same process doon sa kanina. Ang nangyari daw dyan, may newly formed company tayo noong January 20X5. Prepared siya ng temporary difference reversal schedule. At the end of 20X6, that disclosed the following taxable income or loss amounts before application of carryback or carry forward rules. Ang tinatanong, the enacted tax rates for all years was 30%. The total non-current deferred tax liability on December 31, 20X6. December 31, 20X6 was. Okay. Ang hinahanap ay deferred tax liability. Okay? Liability ang pinag-uusapan natin dito. Okay. So kung liability ang hinahanap natin, of course, we are talking about taxable amounts, di ba? So ang taxable, ito. Kasi mga deduction itong dalawang to, yung 20X6 at saka 20X7. Huwag mo nang isama si 20X5 kasi 20X5 pertains to an amount that will already reverse in 20X6. Eh. Okay, so hindi na siya kasama kung 20X6 ang usapan. So ang taxable mo na lang dyan, 80,000 tsaka 20,000. Multiply mo ng 30% na tax rate, 30,000 ang deferred tax liability. Because deferred tax liability only pertains to taxable temporary difference. 20X6 and 20X7 figures are deductible temporary differences. Okay? Yan. Baka kasi sabihin mo rin, sir, hindi ba maninet na lang? Eh sinabi nga kasi before offsetting. Wala din lang namang hindi naman talaga pwedeng ang tawag dito. Hindi naman sinabi ng problem na inet mo eh. Kasi sinabi before application of carryback and carry forward rules. Okay? So, yun. 15. Ay, sorry. Yan. 15 tayo. For 3 consecutive years, the corporation reported income of 100,000 for both financial and tax purposes. During this time, twins income tax rates were as follows. So, ito yung tax rate. In 20x6, the company recognized a warranty provision amounting to 100,000, which will be paid in full next year. Assuming the tax rate is 35%, magkano deferred tax asset? Ang tanong, asset nga ba? Yes, kasi di ba warranty provision is a liability with a carrying amount of 100,000. Tax base is 0. Okay? 0 yung tax base natin. So, 100,000 times 35% kasi yun yung tax rate that will be enacted at the time na magre-reverse siya. So, 35,000 yung sagot. Letter D. Okay? That's 100,000 na carrying amount times 0.35. Letter D. Okay. 16 tayo. Viking Corporation reported depreciation of 250,000 on its 20x5 tax return. However, in its 20x5 income statement, Viking reported depreciation of 100 only. The difference is a temporary difference that will reverse over time. Assuming Viking's tax rate is 30%, what amount should be added to the deferred income tax liability? Okay? So, may difference tayo na 150, di ba? 150 times 0.3. 45,000, letter C. Paano mo nalaman na siya ay income tax liability dapat? Kasi, kung ang depreciation ay 250 for tax return, okay, ibig sabihin mas marami kang binawas kaysa doon sa binawas mo sa accounting income. So, as a result, malamang yung accounting income mas mataas yan sa taxable income, which will definitely result to a deferred tax liability later on. Yan yung nakalagay dun sa item number, saan ba nilagay? Item number 3 sa deferred tax liability. Sources of deferred tax liability. Or taxable temporary difference kanina. Okay, so letter C ang sagot dyan. 17. Cowboy Corporation reported depreciation of 450 in the tax return. However, in the income statement, Cowboy reported depreciation of 300,000 only, as well as 30,000 interest revenue on tax-free bonds. Tax-free, so walang tax na babayaran dito. Okay? Ang tinatanong, the difference in depreciation is only a temporary difference and will reverse equally over the next 3 years. Ang problema nga lang natin, tax rates are as follows. Okay? So, mag-iiba kasi yung tax rate. So, 30, 25, 20. Pansinin mo ulit, effectively, ito sobra ng 5%, ito kulang ng 5%. So, effectively, parang 25% din lang ang effective rate natin. Pero para safe ka na lang, ang gawin mo, di ba may difference na 150,000? 50,000 each kasi every 3 years daw siya magre-reverse starting 20x6. So, 50,000 times 30%, 50,000 times 25%, 50,000 times 20%. Okay? Or basically sa akin, 150 times 0.25 na lang. Letter B, 37,500. Again, 30,000 has no deferred tax component kasi tax-free siya. Okay? Yan. 18 tayo. The books of Tracker Company for the year ended December 31 showed pre-tax income of 360. Ito yung accounting income. In computing the taxable income for federal, so AICPA adopted kasi may federal. Okay, the following timing differences were taken into account. Depreciation, 16,000 and income from installment sales, 12,000. What should Tracker record as current tax at December 31, 20x5, assuming corporate tax rate of 30%. So, gagawin natin, type muna natin yung 360,000. Kasi yan yung accounting income. Consider natin yung effect nito para makuha natin yung taxable income. So, depreciation deducted for tax purposes in excess of depreciation recorded in the book. So, ibig sabihin, kung 360 ang accounting income to may 16,000 daw na excess depreciation for tax purposes. So, magbabawas pa tayo ng 16,000. Okay? Tapos, income from installment sale reported for tax purposes in excess of income recognized in the books. So, in other words, hindi pa natin ito nire-recognize, pero dapat to i-recognize na siya for tax purposes. So, plus 12,000 ulit. So, that's 356 times 0.3. So, that's 106,800. Letter C. Yan. So, ang medyo complicated lang naman sa pagko-compute kasi is baka mapagbaliktad mo yung effect ng mga adjustments or mga differences doon sa accounting income at saka sa taxable income. Okay? 19. Okay. Frey Corporation's income statement for the year ended December 31, 20X5 shows pre-tax income of 1 million. The following items are treated differently on the tax return and in the accounting records. Okay, so ito daw ang treatment sa tax return, ito yung sa accounting records. Assume that Frey's tax rate is 30%. What amount of income tax payable? So kapag payable ang tinatanong, hinahanap sa atin yung taxable or yung current tax based on the taxable income. So magsa-start tayo sa 1 million, tapos i-adjust natin siya for these certain differences para makuha natin yung taxable. Okay? So yung rent income daw, ni-recognize natin ng 120, pero 70 lang daw dapat. So, ibig sabihin, magbabawas tayo, sobra tayo ng 50. Babawas tayo ng 50,000. Depreciation expense, ang nirecognize lang natin ay 220, pero dapat daw 280 yung i-recognize for tax purposes. So, kulang pa ng 60. Magbawas pa tayo ng 60,000. Then, yung premium on officer's life insurance, nagbawas tayo ng 90. Dapat daw wala. So, i-add back natin yung 90,000. So, that's going to be 980. 980,000 times 0.3. That's 294. Letter C. Yun ang payable natin. Okay. 20. Ilas natin tong 20 kasi yung mga kasunod may complicated computations na yan. So last natin tong 20 muna. Okay. Inventive Corporation's income tax or income statement for the year ended December 31, 2025 shows pre-tax amount of 300,000. So similar yung nature niya dun sa number 19. The following items are treated differently. Ang tinatanong, total income tax expense. Total income tax expense. So, ibig sabihin, 300,000 na ang gagamitin natin dyan. Except kung merong permanent differences na kailangang i-consider. Okay? So, syempre, hindi na tayo mag-a-adjust for items dito sa tax return kasi nga, hindi naman tinatanong sa atin yung payable. Ang tinatanong ay total income tax expense. So, supposedly sana yung 300,000 times 0.4, yun na agad ang gagawin natin. So, letter B sana wala pala siya sa choices, buti na lang. Pero baka letter B isagot mo dyan. Pero kasi take note, may premium on officer's life insurance na 60. So, ibig sabihin yung 300,000 is after mong ibawas yung 60. Dapat hindi. I-add back mo yung 60,000 kasi yan ay non-deductible expense. Multiply mo ng 0.4 para makuha mo yung ano bang tax rate? 40%. Ay, sorry. What is the current portion pala ang tinatanong? Okay? Hindi rin lumabas yung sagot ko. Okay? Okay, sagot mo yung letter D. Okay? Ang tinatanong pala, what is the current portion of the total income tax expense? So in other words, ang tinatanong din lang sa atin, current tax expense din lang. So in other words, mag-a-adjust pa rin tayo. So 300,000. Ang nirecord daw na warranty expense is 185,500. 170 lang daw dapat. So sumobra tayo ng 15,500. So plus 15,500 pa. Next. Depreciation expense, nag-record tayo ng 100. Dapat daw 150. So magbawas pa tayo ng 50,000. Okay. Pagkatapos yung premium on life insurance, so na 60,000, add back natin yung 60,000. So, 325,500 times 0.4. Letter C ang sagot. Yan. Okay? So, current portion kasi tinatanong. So, current tax expense din lang yan. Okay? So, pag current portion or current tax expense, hanapin mo yung taxable income, multiply mo ng tax rate. Okay? So, yun yung items natin dyan. So, letter C ang sagot. Okay, stop muna tayo dyan.